Picture this: a household bringing in what should be a solid middle-class income. 2 paychecks hit the account every month, enough that on paper things should feel comfortable. But in 2026, comfort feels like a myth. Rent or mortgage payments swallow more than a third of the take. Home pay, healthcare premiums, and medical bills creep higher every year, and even the cost of owning a modest car, insurance, maintenance, that monthly loan payment is enough to drain what's left. Families open their banking apps and wonder why they feel broke when they're earning more than their parents ever did. It's not just the rising price tags. Credit card balances are at record highs, auto loan debt is stretched across longer and longer terms, and interest rates keep eating away at every extra dollar. Middle class squeeze isn't a theory anymore, it's a lived reality. And the traditional advice of just cutting back or living within your means doesn't feel realistic when the essentials themselves are outpacing wages. That's where a surprisingly simple tool comes in. The 50-33-20 budget rule. It's not flashy or brand new, it's been around for years. But here's the catch: most people either ignore it, misapply it, or assume it's too rigid for their lifestyle. In 2026, though, this framework isn't just a nice to have, it's survival. It forces you to prioritize needs, manage wants, and actually carve out room for savings and debt payoff, even in an environment designed to keep you in the red. This isn't about penny pinching every laddie. It's about creating a structure that protects families from inflation, debt traps, and financial anxiety. Because without a system, the rising tide of costs will pull even hardworking middle-class earners underwater. And the truth is, structure might be the only lifeline left. A middle-class paycheck in 2026 doesn't stretch the way it used to. Families earning what should be stable, respectable incomes find themselves gasping for financial air month after month. The problem isn't that they aren't working hard enough, it's that the numbers no longer add up. Wages have barely moved over the past decade, creeping up only a few percentage points, while costs of living have raced ahead. Rent and mortgage payments now eat up a disproportionate share of income, with average monthly rents in many cities topping levels that used to feel luxurious. Buying a home, once the cornerstone of middle-class security, often requires dual incomes stretched to their limits just to qualify. Little breathing room when interest rates reset or unexpected expenses hit. Groceries tell the same story. A cart that once cost $100 now edges closer to $150 or even $200, with everyday staples like milk, eggs, bread creeping higher in price each quarter. Healthcare is another runaway train. Even families with employer-provided insurance face rising premiums, higher deductibles, and more out-of-pocket costs. Medical debt isn't just a lower income issue anymore. It's quietly gnawing at the middle class, showing up in credit reports and forcing trade-offs between saving for the future and paying today's doctor bills. Then there's the hidden weight of debt. Auto loans are at record highs, not just in volume, but in size and length. More people are financing cars for 6, 7, even 8 years, locking themselves into long-term obligations that leave no room to maneuver when life changes. Credit card balances are also climbing, with interest rates north of 20% making even small balances expensive to carry. This creates the illusion of stability. Families may look fine from the outside, driving new cars and living in decent homes. But inside the financial picture, they're juggling minimum payments, pushing off savings, borrowing from one account to pay another. The old way of handling money, what many people call winging it, feels especially dangerous in this environment. For years, class families could rely on the idea that as long as the bills were covered and a little was left over, everything would sort itself out. That method worked when inflation was lower, interest rates were modest, essentials didn't consume such a large share of the budget. But in 2026, winging it has turned into running in place. Families pay their bills, cover the basics, and yet wonder why their bank account never grows, why credit card balances aren't going down, and why emergencies always push them further behind. Data makes it clear why. The average American household now carries thousands of dollars in credit card debt. With interest compounding, those balances are almost impossible to eliminate without intentional planning. Car loans are no longer manageable side expenses. They're second mortgages in disguise. Meanwhile, inflation doesn't hit evenly. It hits hardest where families can't cut corners like food, healthcare, housing, and utilities. That means no amount of just skip the vacation or stop dining out advice makes a meaningful difference. Without a structured plan, every new cost simply squeezes the same fixed income even tighter. This financial treadmill leaves people exhausted. They feel like they're working endlessly yet getting nowhere. Paychecks vanish before the month is over, debt balances creep higher. The dream of saving for retirement or a child's education feels completely out of reach. It's not for lack of effort. It's because the system itself has shifted against them. This is why relying on outdated habits is a recipe for more stress. The reality is stark in 2026. A structured approach to money management isn't optional. Without clear rules to balance spending, protect savings, and attack debt, the middle class will continue to burn energy just to stay in place. Structure isn't about restriction. It's the only way to break free from the cycle of rising costs and stagnant income that defines life for so many households today. The 50-day, 30-day, 20 rule isn't a new invention. It's been around for years, tucked into personal finance books and blog posts, often dismissed as too simple to matter. Yet in 2026, its simplicity is exactly what makes it powerful. When households are drowning in bills, debt, unpredictable prices, complicated financial systems usually fall apart. What survives is something straightforward, flexible, and rooted in balance. That's what the 50-30-20 rule delivers. A way to divide every paycheck into 3 clear categories that keep life from spinning into financial chaos. Here's how it works. Half of your income, 50%, goes to needs, the essentials you can't avoid: housing, utilities, groceries, transportation, and minimum debt payments. For most families, this is where things go wrong first. Housing costs alone can climb past 30% of income, especially in high-cost areas, leaving very little room for other necessities. Add in rising energy bills and the fact that even basic groceries cost more than ever, and this category tends to swell past its limit. The key is to recognize that needs are truly the non-negotiables. Streaming services, brand name clothes, or upgraded phone plans don't belong here, even if they feel indispensable in the moment. The next slice, 30%, is for wants. This is the area people often misunderstand or misclassify. Wants are lifestyle choices, eating out, vacations, entertainment, subscriptions, the fun money that makes life enjoyable. The danger comes when wants get disguised as needs. A larger home that stretches your mortgage, a luxury car that requires a hefty monthly payment, or a steady stream of online shopping can all sneak into the needs. Call them when, reality, they belong here. The distinction matters because when wants take over, the essentials and the savings categories get squeezed, leaving households vulnerable to the next financial emergency. Leaves 20% for savings and debt payoff. This is the most underutilized category for middle-class families today, yet it's the most critical. It's not just about building a retirement account, it's about creating a financial buffer. Emergency funds, investments, and aggressive debt repayment live here. Even modest contributions add up over time, and this is where financial progress happens. Without this category, households are trapped in survival mode forever, covering today's bills but never building a safety net for tomorrow. The genius of the $50 $3-20 rule isn't its complexity, it's the structure it provides. It forces a level of discipline and clarity that most people don't have when they wing it. Without a rule, money flows wherever the next bill or impulse takes it. With this rule, every dollar has a job. Half goes to survival, nearly a third funds the lifestyle you choose, and the final fifth protects your future. Structure doesn't take away freedom, it gives it back. Instead of constantly wondering where the money went, families can actually enjoy their spending, knowing it fits within a framework. The reason many people struggle isn't that the rule doesn't work, it's that they bend it until it breaks. They tell themselves their wants are needs. They let housing balloon far past 30 or 40% of their income. They skip the savings column because there's nothing left, never realizing that skipping it guarantees nothing will ever be left. When used properly, the rule creates balance. It doesn't demand that you cut out joy. Sure, joy doesn't come at the expense of security. In an era where financial stress is the norm, this framework is more than a budgeting trick, it's a lifeline. Households from chaos by offering a simple map. Follow it closely, and even in the face of rising costs and relentless debt, the system ensures there's room for both living today and preparing for tomorrow. For the middle class in 2026, that kind of balance isn't optional anymore. It's survival. The biggest threat to middle class families in 2026 isn't just inflation or debt. It's the silent drift of money when there's no structure in place. Without clear categories to guide spending, most households slowly let their wants consume more and more of their income, leaving less room for needs and almost nothing for savings. This lifestyle creep doesn't happen overnight. It begins with small upgrades, a bigger apartment because we deserve more space, a newer car because we need reliability, a few extra subscriptions because it's just $10 a month. Each decision feels harmless, but together they quietly shift money away from stability and into consumption. Before long, the budget is upside down, and the family is trapped in a cycle of working harder just to stand still. Card balances are often the first red flag. When needs and wants blur, expenses tend to outpace income, and families rely on plastic to fill the gap. At first, it's a bridge covering groceries, a utility bill, for the holiday season. But with interest rates hovering around 20% or higher, balances snowball quickly. That 500 shortfall grows to 600, then the 700, with minimum payments doing little more than keeping the account open. Feels like it's maintaining control, but in reality, the debt is tightening its grip, stealing future income before it's even earned. This is what happens when money isn't tracked within categories. Families aren't overspending by thousands in one swoop, they're overspending by 100 here, a couple hundred there, and compounding the damage month after month. Retirement takes the biggest hit when a budget lacks structure. Savings are too often treated as optional, something to get around to when the timing feels right. But in 2026, the gap between what the middle class is saving and what they'll actually need is wider than ever. Pensions are nearly extinct, Social Security is uncertain, and the cost of living in retirement is projected to be dramatically higher than today. Ignoring the 20% savings rule doesn't just mean less comfort later. It means many will be forced to work longer, downgrade their lifestyle, or depend on debt even in old age. Without automation and intentional allocation, the savings column stays empty while the wants column quietly expands. That trade-off isn't obvious today, but it becomes painfully clear years down the line when the nest egg is a fraction of what it should be. The truth is, 2026, the margin for error is shrinking. Families can't afford to wing it because the cost of mistakes compounds too quickly. Every dollar that drifts into the wrong category has ripple effects: more debt, less security, fewer options. The households that continue to ignore frameworks like 50 LA 30 or 20 will feel like they're stuck in quicksand, working, earning, and spending, but sinking deeper into obligations they can't escape. On the other hand, those who embrace structure are building quiet, steady strength. By holding the line on needs, they keep essentials affordable. By putting wants in their proper place, they enjoy life without sabotaging tomorrow. By locking in that 20% for savings and debt repayment, they create a foundation that compounds over time. The difference doesn't show up instantly. It builds slowly, like interest working in your favor instead of against you. A few years of discipline is enough to separate those who constantly struggle from those who finally feel like they're gaining ground. In an age where financial uncertainty is everywhere, ignoring rules like this is the same as leaving your financial future to chance. That might have worked decades ago when costs were lower and safety nets were stronger. But in today's world, where everything from housing to healthcare feels designed to drain the middle class, chance isn't good enough. A structured rule is no longer optional. For families who want to survive the squeeze and eventually escape it, the choice is simply stick to a framework like 50 30 20 or risk falling further behind every single year. The 50 or 30 20 rule was designed as a guide, a law carved in stone. Its real strength comes from flexibility, and in 2026, flexibility is the only way it can survive the realities of middle-class life. In many cities, the biggest challenge is housing. Rent and mortgages can easily take up more than half a paycheck, sometimes pushing past 60% of income. That alone breaks the traditional framework because once housing is covered, there's little left for groceries, utilities, and transportation, let alone wants and savings. Families living in these high-cost areas aren't failing the rule. They're living in an environment where the math simply doesn't fit. Instead of abandoning structure altogether, the solution is to adapt. The first step is recognizing that when one category inflates, like housing, other categories need to adjust. If rent takes 60% instead of 50%, the wants category might need to shrink from 30% to 20% or even 10% for a period of time. This doesn't mean cutting out every source of enjoyment, but it does mean prioritizing survival and stability over short-term pleasures. Streaming subscriptions, frequent dining out, and lifestyle upgrades may feel like small indulgences, but together they eat up the flexibility needed to offset oversized housing costs. The trade-off is temporary, but necessary until income rises or housing costs stabilize. Automation is the next critical adaptation. In the past, people relied on willpower to save. Whatever was left at the end of the month went into retirement accounts or emergency funds. But in today's financial climate, what's left is often nothing. The fix is to flip the order, treat savings and debt repayment as the first bill to pay, not the last. Deposits and automatic transfers can carve out that 10, 15, or 20% into savings and investments before the money even hits a checking account. This removes the temptation to spend and ensures that long-term goals are met when day-to-day pressures feel overwhelming. Without automation, savings goals almost always get sacrificed to short-term spending. Debt repayment deserves special focus in 2026. Credit card balances with interest rates above 20% are not just inconvenient, they're toxic. Carrying that kind of debt quietly erases financial progress, no matter how well other categories are managed. One adaptation to the 50 30 20 rule is to temporarily shrink the wants category further and redirect those funds into accelerated debt payoff. This might mean living with fewer lifestyle comforts for a year or two, but the payoff is dramatic once high interest balances are cleared, the budget opens up again, and the rule can return to its traditional balance. The key is to view this not as deprivation, but as a short-term strategy for long-term relief. For many families, the biggest hurdle is mental. The original 50 rate 30 over 20 rule sounds rigid. When real life doesn't match the percentages, people feel like they've failed. But the point of the framework is not perfection, it's control. Whether the split looks like 60 ZLG 20 age 20, 55 for 25, 20, 65 50 V 20 during high cost seasons, the structure still works as long as each dollar is assigned intentionally. What matters most is protecting the savings and debt category because that's what builds financial stability. Wants can flex, needs can be managed creatively, but savings cannot be sacrificed without consequences. Modernizing the rule also means recognizing inflation's role. Costs for food, utilities, and healthcare are unpredictable. Families who stick to rigid percentages often feel like they're constantly failing. A better approach is to check the categories regularly, adjusting them as incomes, expenses, and goals shift. The percentages are a guidepost, not a trap. The goal is balance, ensuring that enjoyment today doesn't steal from security tomorrow. 50-3-20 rule in 2026 isn't about living by someone else's math. It's about making sure the categories still serve their purpose. Even when housing takes more than its share, even when debt feels crushing, when inflation bites into every corner of the budget, the framework survives by bending without breaking. With automation, intentional trade-offs, and flexibility, the rule remains as relevant as ever, offering the middle class not perfection, but direction. And in a time of financial uncertainty, direction is everything. What makes the 50-3 rule powerful isn't just the arithmetic, it's the shift in mindset it creates. On the surface, it looks like a simple way to divide a paycheck, but in practice, it forces people to confront something they often avoid: where their money is really going. Without structure, expenses blur together. Dinner out feels the same as paying the electric bill, and a shopping spree feels as necessary as buying groceries. The framework cuts through that blur by putting every expense into a bucket. Suddenly, the leaks become obvious. Subscription you never use, it lives in the wants category and starts to look less important when you see how it eats into the 30% slice. That car upgrade you justified as a need. Seeing it categorized correctly makes you rethink if it's actually worth how much future security it sacrifices. This clarity is where balance begins. Most holds don't overspend on purpose. They overspend because they haven't defined limits.
Yeah.
The rule doesn't eliminate spending on enjoyment, it just caps it, making sure lifestyle upgrades don't swallow savings. Balance is key. It keeps life enjoyable while ensuring the future isn't ignored. A family sticking to the framework can still go on vacation or enjoy dinners out, but they do so knowing the important stuff is covered. This reduces the guilt that comes from spending because the system already guarantees their financial base is protected. Over time, the system becomes more than just balanced spending. It becomes an engine for building wealth in the background. When the 20% savings and debt payoff category is automated, progress happens quietly but powerfully. Imagine a household earning $5,000 in a month. By sticking to the framework, well over $1,000 gets set aside monthly for debt repayment, retirement accounts, or investments. Over a year, that's $12,000 directed toward financial growth. Over 5 years, that's $60,000, not including the compounding growth that comes from investments. It's not about hitting a jackpot. It's about consistent, automatic progress that most people miss because they never carve out that space intentionally. Debt payoff becomes much faster under this system as well. Instead of scattering extra payments inconsistently, the 20% allocation funnels consistent resources toward balances. A family with $10,000 in credit card debt paying only minimums could be stuck for decades. By dedicating even a few $100 extra each month from the savings category, that debt can disappear in just a few years. The math is important, but the psychology is even more powerful. With a structured plan, families stop feeling like they're drowning and start seeing visible results month by month. That sense of control reduces stress, which is half the battle in financial management. The investment side tells the same story. Most people intend to invest someday, but put it off because they feel they need to learn every detail first. The rule eliminates that decision fatigue. 20% is consistently directed into retirement accounts or index funds through automation. Wealth grows without constant overthinking. Someone who starts with just a few $100s a month can accumulate a six-figure portfolio over a couple of decades, even without becoming an expert. The system builds wealth by default, turning the background noise of daily financial stress into long-term security. The real hidden power of this framework is how it reduces the mental burden of money. Without it, every purchase feels like a debate. Should I buy this? Can I afford that? Will this hurt my future? The 50-3-20 rule removes the debate. If the purchase fits into your wants slice, it's fine. If it doesn't, it waits. That simplicity makes money less overwhelming. Instead of overthinking every dollar, households follow a roadmap that works automatically in the background. In practice, this turns the framework into a kind of wealth autopilot. It doesn't require complicated spreadsheets, financial jargon, or perfect discipline. It just requires commitment to the categories and consistency over time. For middle-class families in 2026, where money stress feels constant, this autopilot isn't just helpful, it's life-changing. It provides relief today, growth tomorrow, and most importantly, confidence that money is finally working for them instead of against them. The first step to making the 50-30-20 rule work is figuring out where you stand right now. Most people have a rough idea of their monthly bills, but very few actually know their true spending split. This starts with tracking 1 month of income and expenses. Write down or pull from your banking app every major category: housing, utilities, groceries, transportation, debt payments, entertainment, subscriptions, shopping, and savings. Then compare those numbers against your take-home pay. For many middle-class households in 2026, the reality looks more like $7.20 or worse. Housing and other needs dominate, wants creep higher than expected. Savings barely get a slice. Seeing this on paper can feel discouraging, but it's actually empowering. You can't change what you don't measure. Of calculating your current split is the first step toward taking control. Once the numbers are clear, the next move is reallocation. If needs are closer to 60 or 70%, the goal isn't to magically force them down to 50% overnight. It's to gradually make adjustments that move you in the right direction. This might mean shopping for cheaper insurance, refinancing a loan, or downsizing unnecessary recurring costs like multiple streaming services or premium phone plans that hide in the needs category. If wants are higher than 30%, start trimming here first. Back on dining out for a few months, downgrade vacation plans, or pause non-essential subscriptions. Every dollar freed up can be redirected into the savings and debt category, which is where the most long-term impact comes from. Isn't perfection on day one, it's progress toward balance over time. Automation is the tool that makes this shift sustainable. Too often, savings and investments get treated as optional, something to tackle only after all the spending is done. But when savings are automated, whether it's 10%, 15%, or the full 20%, they happen before discretionary money even hits the checking account. Deposits into retirement accounts, automatic transfers into high-yield savings, or scheduled contributions into brokerage accounts remove temptation and decision fatigue. Transform saving from something you have to remember to something that happens on autopilot. Over time, these small, consistent contributions add up to something much larger than any one-off effort. Repayment works the same way. Once you know how much of your 20% allocation is available, set up automatic payments above the minimums on high interest balances. An extra $200 a month consistently applied to a credit card balance can shave years off repayment time. Without automation, it's easy to rationalize skipping a month or spending the money elsewhere. With automation, the decision is already made and progress happens quietly in the background. Rebalancing is just as important as starting. Life in 2026 is unpredictable. Costs rise, incomes change, and debt levels shift. That's why it's critical to revisit your budget at least once a year. Look at how your percentages stack up again. If your income has grown, resist the temptation to let lifestyle creep, push wants higher and higher. Instead, the extra money into savings and investments to accelerate progress. If inflation has eaten into your needs, make conscious adjustments elsewhere rather than letting the whole system fall apart. Treat the budget like a living document, flexible enough to adapt but structured enough to keep you anchored. What makes this process effective isn't a hidden hack or a secret trick, it's consistency. The households that stick with the framework, even imperfectly, end up far ahead of those who never commit to it at all. Each paycheck becomes a chance to practice discipline. Over time, the small wins compound into real stability and growth. It doesn't matter if you start with a messy 72 days, 2 out 8, 10 split. What matters is that you move closer to 50 days, 30, 20, and let automation and time do the heavy lifting. In a financial environment where chaos feels normal, this kind of structured consistency is what separates survival from progress. It's not about chasing hacks, it's about creating a system that works whether you're paying off debt, fighting inflation, or building wealth for the future.